Um, well, I think I know everybody here, but in case you don't know me, my name is Sam. You're you. I'm over at the Wesley Foundation on Southeastern's campus. Been there for several years, just doing all kinds of fun stuff. You guys have been involved with that in many ways with all the students we serve over there. It's been a crazy semester, y'all. It's interesting. It's interesting to see like things getting back to normal, like whatever that means anymore. But it's interesting to see the energy of the students and to see the life and how much has changed over the past, 3 years, of what we were before, what we are now, and where we're going in the future. And I just I'm going to thank you all for that, because you're a big part of that with all the stuff that you guys help us out with. I know for me, like September, when's your birthday, Gina?
The 27th.
Wow, my sister's birthday's the 27th. So like, are we like siblings now? What does that mean? Yeah, I'm not gonna ask you when you were born, because I guess you're not allowed to do that, right? That's not allowed to do that. But yeah, my sister's birthday's coming up. Speaking of that, I have not gotten her present yet. Somebody remind me later. But also, my daughter's birthday is in September, and so is my son's. So like, my daughter turned 15, and my son turned 29. 29. Like, I'm 47, so I'm more like, I've been thinking a lot about things, like things, you know what I mean? And so like, when I realized my daughter's 15, my son's 29, I'm 47, I'm like, I'm really getting old. I can barely remember when I was 29, right? Like 29 is a nothing age too, right? It's like nothing happens when you're 29. But buckle up, you guys will see. But then it really made me start thinking about, I don't want to get down, but it really made me start thinking about like my parents, like my parents have both been passed away now for, good golly, almost 7 years. My mom died, my dad died, and my mom died about a year later. And that's really, I think, my first time, because that was so long ago, 7, 8 years ago. But it was when I really realized that, oh, I'm gonna die one day, and it's just, does anybody remember the first time that hit them? Like, oh, I'm not gonna live forever. And it's like, well, that's an uncomfortable feeling, right? And I thought about that, like, how we all are so different, like as people, all of us. We're like insanely, infinitely different how we are. And but I realized that, like, that's one of the core things we share, is that none of us gets out of this alive. And I think the other thing that we share a lot of is that we try to avoid, ignore, and distract ourselves from that as much as humanly possible. I mean, quite honestly, I think that's a normal thing to do. I mean, who wants to think about that? Like, I'm sure you guys are like, Sam, did you really come here to talk about dying for 30 minutes? Yep, I did. But just to raise things up a little bit, like, has anybody ever seen that Bucket List movie? Yes. Who hasn't seen it? Probably the young kids.
Oh, I did.
You did it too? You need to, Alan, what?
I've seen it 3 times, so it makes up for it.
I think you're slipping. But it's a great movie. Y'all should watch it. It's a really great movie. It's got Jack Nicholson. Is it Nicholson or Nicholas?
Nicholas.
I heard 3 different answers. What?
Son of Nickel.
Son of Nickel. Okay, well, Jack Nickel, whatever. And Morgan Freeman. They're these 2 totally different people. Like Jack Nickel, whatever, is like super rich, like super duper rich, and he's kind of a jerk. And then Morgan Freeman's just an average guy. And the thing they have in common is they're both got this horrible form of, I think, cancer, if I remember correctly. And it's terminal, and both of them are not gonna, and it's really funny how they're in the same, it's like what I was saying, like, we're all very different, but yet they were in the same room together, and they were just equals. Didn't matter how rich he was, didn't matter how normal Morgan Freeman was, they were the same. And they started arguing, and of course, as all good movies, they some kind of tension happens, and then they start talking about Morgan Freeman actually starts talking about he's writing something down, and Jack is going like, what are you doing? And like, I'm writing down this bucket list. Wow, it's a bucket list, you know, and it's like all the things I'm going to do before I die. And somehow, some way, they're like, well, I got all this money, you've got all these ideas, let's go do all these things. And so that's what they do, right? Because if you look at it, both of them, for as rich as Jack Nicholson was and as normal as Morgan Freeman was, they've never really enjoyed life. And so they're like, well, let's, which is, well, don't we all do that? Be like, well, if I'm going to just work to here, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to enjoy life. Or just, it's like, well, that seems like a bad idea. Like, you only have 1 year to enjoy your life. That's not too smart. But so they go on this huge adventure. What's that?
Hold the mic.
Oh, back a little bit? Well, and they go on this huge adventure, right? And because Jack Nicholson got tons of money. And so they go skydiving, they go to the Great Wall of China, they climb one of the pyramids and have a picnic on it. And it's like, it's a great movie. It really is. You should watch it. You should watch it. And ultimately, what's funny about it is it's not about death at all. It's almost like 99% not about death. It's about life. It's about regret. It's about faith. It's about God even. And what's really cool is at the end of it all, or even over the course of it, you see these people that are just totally different, and they become these great, great friends, and both of them are changed forever before the end of the movie. Now, it makes me think about, has anybody ever thought about that? Like, do you have like a bucket list, quote unquote, of things you want to do before you leave this, shuffle this mortal coils? Anybody have that? Anybody? You do? Really? Awesome. No, only one person? Wow. You do too?
I do, but they told me I couldn't go swimming with great white sharks.
Oh, that's generally not, that's a good way to not get it done.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay, so great white sharks, and name one thing on your list.
Well, I want to go to Thailand.
Good choice. But,
You got company.
oh, you got company. You ever, and that's usually what's on it, right? Like go to Thailand, go swim with great white sharks. All these things, like go places, see things, do this. It makes me wonder, like, is that the right stuff that's supposed to be on it? I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, is it the right thing that should be on it? And it made me start really thinking about something that Jesus said a couple thousand years ago. And I love, by the way, I think I've told you guys before, the Bible's a really fascinating library, and one of the really interesting genres of literature in the Bible is the Gospels, which are really just eyewitness accounts. They're just eyewitness accounts of what people saw, firsthand account of Jesus. And I deal with a lot of folks that have no Bible experience, no Jesus experience, and if we ever get to that point where we're talking about Jesus, I always, like, there's all these theories about what you should tell people to read, like, read John or read this and that. I was like, no. Read Matthew 5 through 7, that's all you're ever going to need. That's it. I mean, the rest is okay. It's good stuff. But Matthew 5 through 7 is like, if you want to know what Jesus is all about, that and what being a follower of Jesus is all about, that's it right there. And so that's what Matthew 5 through 7, for people to know, it's called the Sermon on the Mount. And a lot of people think that it wasn't like one sermon that Jesus did and that was it. It's kind of like preachers. We have like a lot of sermons we preach the same different places. And we may tweak it a little bit, but we preached a lot of different places. And even some say that it's not even one sermon. It's like a bunch of like a whole bunch of his sermons like weaved together. That's what some say that Matthew was trying to do. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is we know for sure that this is what Jesus taught. Like one of his, like if we look at what some of the core things that Jesus talked about, we're 99.9% sure that Matthew 5 through 7 is the core of Jesus' teaching. And what's really interesting when you start like reading that, and actually a lot of Jesus' stuff is that when we talk about our best life and all that kind of stuff, is that Jesus didn't really talk a lot about what happens after we die. He talked a lot more about what happens before we die. And there was this one part in Matthew 6, particularly beginning in verse 19, where he starts, I think, kind of talking about a bucket list in a way, at least the way we think about it. And he says, he says this, he says, don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, where thieves break in and steal. He says, store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. And then he ends it with this. He says, wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Now, to be clear, like Jesus is talking about stuff. He's talking about money. And he says something that I think we all can agree on, especially folks that have been in the game a while, is you can't serve God and money at the same time. Or you can't serve family and money at the same time. It's like one of the things I say to a lot of my pastor friends or even folks that are getting into careers, like, especially when you're starting a family or even just forget about starting a family, just having friends, you're going to be choosing what to cheat the rest of your life. Like, you're going to be choosing, like, I'm going to put all of my time into my job, but that means that your relationships are going to fail or suffer. Or I'm going to put all of my energy in enjoying my life. Well, then that means your career and probably your pocketbook is going to suffer a little bit. And so, it's a really different way to look at things, but you really got to think about what you're going to choose to cheat in your life. And I will say this, though. He's clearly not saying money and stuff is bad at all. He's saying that you can't serve both. Like, something's going to give. And there's something really important that I think why you can see why it's not bad. He's just saying it's not eternal. None of these things are eternal. There's the money, the stuff, it's not eternal. They'll go away. So like, why in the world would you give all of your life to money and stuff? Right? Why? Because, think about all the time we think about how we look. Like how many times have I, like in my last 8 years having that big old beard, how I've to take care of it, and then one day it's gone. Or like how I'm getting older and like my face is just starting to droop. Or I think about all the time, like how I think about how to make myself more comfortable, or to get the recognition that I deserve, or think about all the ways to get more secure. And what's interesting is, as I've gone, maybe you guys have seen this too, you spend all your time on this and you realize that it doesn't matter how hard you try. Your face is still going to droop. You're still going to be uncomfortable. There's only so much you can do to make yourself secure before you're not secure. And so none of these things are bad. They're just, Jesus is saying, why waste your time on them? They're not eternal. Why put all of your trust and your effort into these things? But and luckily, for once, Jesus tells us what to put your effort into. He doesn't always do that. But he says, he's talking about treasures in heaven, heavenly treasures. Now, this is something that's very interesting to me. Like, when Jesus talks about, like, we talk about heaven a lot. Like, even we talked, like your birthday thing, we said something about heaven. Like, Jesus really doesn't talk about heaven very much. He uses the word heaven. He uses the word kingdom of God a lot. But he doesn't really talk about it too much. And when he does, it's really clear that he's not talking about some far-off place that he's talking about here. He's talking about right now. And it really made me start thinking. Because that's what prompted me to do all this when my folks died. I really started thinking about what is this? What is it that we exactly believe about life and death and all this kind of stuff? And I really did this huge deep dive, personal thing into this, and I realized, at least my understanding of it, I think I know what Jesus was talking about. I think I know what God's been talking about for thousands and thousands of years of what heaven really is and what treasures, heavenly treasures truly are. And I think it's relationships. Think about it. If you look at from beginning to end, throughout the story of God, it's all about relationships. Even in the garden, even at the very end, it's relationships. Even the corner of one of the core foundational things we believe as Christians is this concept of the Trinity, right? We say it a lot. We have no idea what it means. But it's this the idea of the Trinity of really it's three people that are actually one. It's a relationship that's fully giving, fully receiving. And what happens when something like that happens, love and life and energy and just beauty pop forth of it. And so everything is about relationships. Even think about physics. Everything in your body is about relationships, about attraction. It just goes on and on. And when I think about it, I just think about that's it. That's what Jesus is talking about all the time about the kingdom of God, about heavenly treasures, about treasures in heaven. He's talking about relationships. Because if you think about it, that is the only thing we get to take with us anywhere. The good ones and the bad ones, by the way. Like, so go back to the bucket list. So they went on all these adventures, right? I left a little bit out, by the way. They went on all these adventures, and they experienced all these great things. But the thing was that they were all passing. I mean, kind of when you eat lunch on top of a pyramid, the Great Pyramids, I mean, is like Panera going to cut it anymore? I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, it's not eternal. But in the end, the real story in the bucket list was the relationships. That's what the real story was. Because first of all, the relationship between Jack whatever, and Morgan Freeman, that relationship got really tight. But both of them, their familial relationships were wrecked. Like wrecked. And about how during this time of being together in this relationships that they had, they began to restore relationships with the people that were estranged in their life. Both of them did. And at the end of it all, they even like had some kind of peace with what it meant to leave this world, and what it meant to like be at peace with the Creator. And see, as they were finishing their main bucket list, there was this other bucket list that the movie was really about not about earthly treasures, not about that stuff on Morgan Freeman's list about money and trips and places and all that kind of good stuff. It was about heavenly treasures. It was about new relationships. It was about restored relationships. That's what the whole movie was actually about. I think that's what life is really all about. Like I think about my mom, for example. My mom and dad, in a lot of ways, they were like the characters in that movie. Like my dad was all about stuff, and my mom was all about not stuff, in a way. And like I think about my mom, about how always positive and caring she was, how she loved people, and she never really cared about stuff, ever. Like, she didn't even care about her funeral expenses. We had to take care of that. But I mean, it was like she just did not care about that stuff. But she didn't really have a bucket list at all. She had this other bucket list that had no stuff on it at all. It all had people on it. Like I think about her sister, Kay, who is a train wreck. We all have siblings like that. My mom never lost hope for her, ever. Or I think about even some of the struggles my mom and dad suffered. How like she constantly chose to forgive him over and over and over again. Even me, like it may shock you that I might be hard to live with, but like how patient she was with me constantly. How over and over again she chose these eternal things, these heavenly treasures of relationships, because she knew something that it took me a long time to figure out after she died. That's the only thing we get to take with us. That's it. And so like, when I think about it, like, that was weird as I think about my mom and I miss her, and I think about my dad and I miss him, that I'm like 100% sure I'm going to get to enjoy this relationship with them again. It's just a little break that I'm in right now. Because I know that in the end, that's what we really work towards, was the relationships. And so, like, I'm asking you this question. I'm sure, we have our bucket list, even though we didn't raise our hand about the places we want to go, the things we want to do, the money we want to spend, all that kind of good stuff. But what's on your other bucket list? You know what I'm trying to say? Like, when it comes to family, I think a lot of times we think about, like, oh, we got to save for college, or we're going to save for this vacation, or we're going to save for this and that, and invest in our family members, our kids, or whatever in our life. What if instead of that we think about investing in memories? Like, I have a friend of mine, she's like that. Like, her family, that's all they ever did was spend money on experiences together as a family, and it drastically changed who she is as a person. Is there someone on that list that hurt you? Or maybe you hurt them? And what could you do to like take a step towards like giving forgiveness or seeking forgiveness from them? Or even like the stuff that we talk about as Christians, like when we see the folks in Hammond that are in need of food or clothing or whatever, and it's so easy to give money in clothes and all of this stuff. But what would happen if we, like, I don't know, asked them their name, or gave them a name, or invest in them as people? Or there's probably some people in here, believe it or not, that have never really even thought about what it means to have a relationship with Jesus. To, like, fully understand, like, through Jesus, we can understand not only who God is, but who we are. And that we don't have to worry about what the world tells us who we are, what the world, or who God is. Like, we can look at Jesus and see exactly who we are, full of all that joy and peace and patience and kindness that we know Jesus is. Like, because here's the thing, I think the thing that's hard about relationships, and this is therapy for me, but is I think why we don't choose to invest in them is because we're probably going to get hurt, right? Like, trips to Thailand aren't going to hurt us. Well, unless we drink the water, son. But you know, these things aren't going to hurt us. You are guaranteed to get hurt when you're in a relationship with somebody. Guaranteed. But here's the thing. I don't think we can ever be truly human if we're not in fully giving and fully receiving relationships with folks. Because that's really what it means to be truly human. To be vulnerable, to be open. To trust in the heavenly things that Jesus is talking about. Because these things that we invest in, these relationships, are the things that are going to be with us until the end of time. Okay, I know, thinking about death is a bummer, sorry. But I really want us to sit and pause and think about what Jesus is really showing us here, about not about stuff or money, but about relationships, about heavenly treasures. Because someday, you know, our day's going to come. It will. There's no way around it. But here's the thing. I'm convinced that Jesus has shown us how to live the best life now, how to live with our heavenly treasures, with our relationships right now. And we don't have to wait for some far off day. We can live our best life right here and right now. Let me pray for us. All loving, all powerful God, I give you thanks for Matthew. I give you thanks for this book, these words that you've preserved for us for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, telling us who you are and who we are. And so thankful for Matthew that he took the time to write down his experience with your son, with Jesus, and he took the time to really write down this core teachings, this sermon that Jesus gave that is just revolutionary about what it means to be human, being truly human. And I'm so thankful that he even took the time to write down something about this uncomfortable topic of money and stuff, the thing that we chase after our whole life with, and that Jesus gave us an answer of what real treasure is, what heavenly treasure is, and that's relationships with the people that you've given us in our life, and some of the people that we've never even got to meet yet. And so I know every single one of us in here has relationships. Every single one of us here. And some of those relationships are good. And so I pray for every single one of those relationships that your Spirit will continue to weave us together with that person to help us be more vulnerable, to help us love and care and serve those people and receive that in return from them fully, to receive what it means to be loved and cared for by another person. And I know that there's not so good relationships that we have, where we've been hurt, where we've hurt them, where some things that were said that just can't be unsaid, where there's time that was spent that can't be unspent. But one thing that you've shown us is clear is that it only takes one decision to change the whole game. That all we have to do is instead of walking away from this person, we can choose to turn towards them and make an effort to reconnect. Even if it's just to say, I'm sorry, or please forgive me, or to tell them that you forgive them. And that's some of the hardest things we're ever going to do in our life. But so I pray that your Spirit will just totally saturate us and give us a sense of comfort and peace and confidence that we can take those steps towards making bad relationships good. And so that we can, once again, enjoy this heavenly treasures of relationships, of restored relationships in our life and in the lives of the people around us. Give us the wisdom and the courage to step forward and actually experience heaven here on earth, right here and right now. So I pray this all humbly in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Blessed be the tie that binds our